Hello, everyone. My name is William Bell, and I am here today to talk to you about digital resiliency, right? We've had a ton of conversations. If you've been on our previous webinars, we've discussed things about kind of data protection, and we've discussed things about disaster recovery. But ultimately, what most of you are truly trying to achieve is a form of digital resiliency, right? You want to make sure that across your entire environment, right, that you have protection, you have restoration, and ultimately resiliency for your IT assets. So today, I've got my buddy Michael Deemer from Veeam. He's going to help me out with some of the more Veeam specific stuff. But we're going to kick this off and start talking about kind of like this general availability gap that people are seeing in the market, right? So like ultimately, when you go to architect an application, when you are implementing someone else's, solution, vendor X solution, whatever, you should be planning for availability of that application, right? And I know that during COVID, a lot of people got kind of stuck here, right? Like they didn't really understand like what their entire availability gaps. Maybe they planned for disaster recovery, but they hadn't planned for access changes, right? And ultimately, all this creates availability issues for either internal or external consumers, right? And so you see these, when you do these studies, right? Veeam did this study that we're referencing today. You see that most organizations across the global company, right? In the global assessment that Veeam is doing, have some sort of availability gap, right? We're going to talk through what some of those might look like. But the sad and unfortunate thing is a lot of the availability gaps that exist out there still are oriented to some type of data protection problem, right? Or data resiliency problem, right? They create a ton of data and it's everywhere. It's in a SaaS application. It's in a unstructured data file store. It's somewhere, in some place that ultimately is not truly resilient from some sort of issue, right? And like, everybody's seen this to some extent in some capacity in your organizations. You've been there when something was offline and you literally had no way to gain access to any of the data. And I'm not saying everything works exactly the way you want it to work, but like if Salesforce was down tomorrow, right? Do you even have another list of your customers in any capacity, points of contact, right? Like what do these resiliency issues look like for your organization, right? And I think that, those are the understated things. Yes, Mike and I are going to talk a lot about data protection and specifically what Veeam's doing. But ultimately, as we get through this presentation, what you're going to see is that even traditional data backup vendors, right? I know that's a dirty word, Michael, but like traditional backup vendors understand this problem. They've spent devoted half their roadmaps to fixing the problem of SaaS data protection, right? The problem of unstructured data protection. Like it's just something that has to be done because we have all these kind of big availability gaps inside of these organizations. So when you look at like how we start to tackle some of these things, right? You have to find a way to achieve better resiliency through your digital transformation objectives. Some people, digital transformation, and this is a sad point, but like for some people, digital transformation is a word they use to talk about public cloud adoption, right? Because it makes more sense for some business person somewhere, right? But ultimately, regardless of how you're trying to transform yourself digitally, gain access to more data, produce more metadata, like these are some of the things that maybe as an infrastructure and operations person, who likely is the people on the call today, you're not seeing, right? Because it's some data scientist or some developer somewhere that's generating all this data. But ultimately, you know, and I apologize if there are developers and VPs of engineering on the call, but like ultimately, a lot of this data that's being created, these guys really suck at protecting it, right? Or ensuring its resiliency in any capacity, right? All they know is they're making a bunch of data, they're mining the crap out of it, and they are finding ways to use that data to help the business, right? Right up until the point that the thing that they rely on, the service, the data store, the whatever, doesn't exist anymore, and they are in trouble, right? And so, you know, we see all kinds of issues, right? We've talked in previous webinars about ransomware and what it's doing to organizations and how impactful it is as a in its totality, right? What it can actually do to an organization by just not even deleting your data. In some senses, you get access to it again, right? A lot of folks, you know, get access to their data again through paying ransoms, which we do not recommend. The FBI does not recommend. Veeam does not recommend. But like, you know, you regain access to your data, but your downtime's been atrocious, right? And your brand recognition or your brand damage is super high. And so we see all of these costs start to add up, right? And they list this cost of recovery. It's a number that people track in this, like, to try to put some type of tangible dollar figure on stuff. But ultimately, you know, and I know that there is certainly for and this is averages, right? So there's some big companies in here, but it costs more than whatever the average is listed there, because you will suffer long-term brand damage that will, you know, ultimately hurt your business in ways that you don't even understand, right? And so this isn't a scare tactic. This is an encouragement, right? I'm encouraging everybody on the call to think about these things and make them a general part of your strategy so that you don't end up in these bad situations, so that you can get to the point where through your digital transformation, you're achieving better digital resilience. So back up your data, replicate your data, understand where your data is at and what data is being generated and how critical that is to organizations. Think about things that are not just data protection or disaster recovery oriented. Maybe it's access of data, right? Maybe it's you know, things like internal threats, right? There's all kinds of things that can you know, hurt your organizations in terms of providing an available and resilient service to your consumer, whether that's internal or external. And you have to think about all of them ultimately. So you see, there is this common misnomer that digital resilience is just a term to be used to say that we need to back everything up and we need to make everything more secure, right? It is those things, right? So it's just kind of like the square rectangle thing. But ultimately, you know, you have all of these initiatives around security, and I'll call it data protection. We'll throw that in there with security, to make sure that you back up, replicate, secure in terms of access from unwanted people, infrastructure components, right? And you use all of these initiatives to help you reduce, not eliminate, reduce the risk of falling victim to an attack, right? And ultimately, you have to find ways to make sure that you do all of this security stuff in ways that your organization is sustainable for your organization, because your organization is and its ability to operate and turn a profit and, you know, return value to shareholders, which I think is kind of going out of the business school mentality, you know, as we go over the next few years. But return value to shareholders, all of that is predicated on the idea that you're implementing structured and well thought out security and data protection programs. Now, the resiliency side, you know, can mean so much more, right? And we talked about that. So maybe it's access to infrastructure. Maybe it's other types of business continuity and risk mitigation. Maybe that's, I mean, in a lot of cases, it's insurance, it's a multi-vendor strategies. There's so many things that you can do to help your organization be highly resilient to any type of issue, security issue, technical issue, social issue, right? COVID-19. I think that's this is where we're at as a globe today. This is what we need to be thinking about, and it's more than just, but also includes, I think that's the very important, the guy sitting in foreign actor country X trying to get your stuff. It's way more than that. And so I think that even just acknowledging that and making sure you're thinking about these things gets you a long way down the road. So I've talked about a lot of stuff. I want to make sure that we kind of bucket it out and get you into a place where you can think about these concepts in a structured fashion, right? The PowerPoint is down in the handout section. You guys can take this, show it to some executive and be like, here's my strategy, right? But ultimately, you want to identify and mitigate threats before they do something bad to you. And threats are not just malware and ransomware and things like that. I'm talking about all those threats I talked about, right? You want to make sure that you can recover if one of those protection mechanisms fail. And I'm just trying to be more generic, right? Then, recover from a backup or recover from, a network outage or whatever, right? Like, but if one of those threats succeeds, right, and it causes an issue, how do you recover from it, right? And after you recover, what are you doing to make sure that your organization adapts to these changes and implements better X controls, data protection mechanisms, network resiliency, like whatever you're recovering from? How do you adapt and ensure that you reduce the likelihood, and I'm trying to like pound that into everybody's head, reduce the likelihood, not eliminate the likelihood or the risk of something bad happening in this category, right? And then as an optimization, how durable can you make these components? How can you make sure that you recover in a state that is highly congruent with the state you were in before, right? And I think that as you walk through this kind of thought process, you have to make sure that you're checking all these boxes, because if you leave one of them out, you're gonna be in a lot of trouble, right? So protect, recover, adapt, and optimize. Like, that's really what it comes down to as you're trying to make things better. And so when we talk about this, and we're going to transition into how we do this from a data protection perspective, I want to make sure that you guys are thinking about digital resiliency as a concept. And then we're going to try to give you a tangible example when it comes to data protection, because my friends at Veeam are on the call, right? What this looks like and how you can think about it, right? And so, yeah, okay, you're backing things up, but like, how many copies do you have? Where are they at, right? And like, how resilient and durable are those copies from some type of issue, right? So you follow the 3-2-1 rule. If you don't know what the 3-2-1 rule is, I think Mike's gonna cover it, but if he doesn't, you should have been here for webinar 1 through 7, right? As Mike and I have been walking through COVID, right? And so you follow the 3-2-1 rule, you safely store and back up your data, you make sure at least one of those copies is immutable. Fancy term, new term, right? Running around, but ultimately making sure that even if someone wants to delete it, it can't be deleted. Even if someone wants to encrypt it, it can't be encrypted, because it's basically written once and that's it for a period of time, right? Some period of time, and there's no ability to override it in any capacity. And then ensure that you get really fast recovery to help restore access and make the application or systems more recoverable. And test these plans that you're coming up with, because if you don't test them, you don't know that they work. I cannot tell you, it's sad, it hurts my feelings when our customers that we help get data protection, solutions, and they don't ever test them. I can't test them for you, right? Like ultimately, if you use one of our data protection solutions powered by Veeam or otherwise, I can't help you test them. I don't run your business. You are the one that has to go through the process of making sure that your organization is ready and prepared and is testing that preparedness. So stay in control, right? Make sure that you have these things, you're following some of these processes. And so Mike's gonna walk through specifically what that looks like from a Veeam ecosystem perspective, and then I'm gonna come back and share a few thoughts more for you after we're done there. All right, Mike, take it away.
Thank you very much, William, and thanks for having me. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Deemer, Systems Engineer here for Veeam Software, and I'll be taking you through the Veeam Backup and Disaster Recovery side of this particular webinar here today. So William touched on a ton of good stuff. Literally, one of the biggest things that I love to talk about is the 3-2-1 rule. But before I get into that, I do want to talk about testing, and he hit it the nail right on the head. I mean, I can't say as many times as I talk to customers and partners and clients about testing their backups. This is mission critical to making sure that we can actually be able to be digitally resilient to these particular matters at hand. So that kind of leads me right into the 3-2-1 rule. Some of you guys may know it. Some of you guys may have heard of it. This might be just a no-brainer for some of you. But so we have the regular 3-2-1 rule, and then I like to put in the 3-2-1-0 rule, and it kind of goes like this. So you have 3 different copies of your data. In this particular case, they're going to be VBK files, which is basically active folds of that data. Now we have 2 different types of media, whether that's going to be like some type of spinning disk and tape, or higher end spinning disk like SSD, NVMe drives, and then having one offsite. And William touched right on this, is having a mutable repository offsite is also mission critical to this. So there's a bunch of different places that we can really land on. I really like the data center side, aka phoenixNAP, so we can actually have that peace of mind knowing that we have that one particular data set offsite. Now, that's the regular 3-2-1 rule. Now, what we actually do is we pair that with the 0 rule. Now, what is the 0 rule? Actually making sure that we test these backups, right? And basically, we're going to go through recovery verification, which I'll touch on. And actually, the next slide here will touch on what this sandbox really looks like. So what does it look like when ransomware hits? All right, so let me kind of break down this slide for you. So we have our hypervisor, whether that's VMware, Hyper-V, or Nutanix. And then we have our storage arrays, whether that's HPE, Nimble, NetApp, Dell EMC, whole bunch of different slew of storage targets that we have here. And then we have our VMs that sit on top, or our virtual machines. Now, these virtual machines could be databases, they could be applications, they could be file, or just unique personal data, kind of like a VDI, right? So as you see, ransomware has hit this particular environment. Now, the very first thing ransomware loves to do is encrypt your environment, right? And making sure that you can't actually touch those databases, those applications, that file, or that personal data. So your business has now stopped. And the next thing you're probably going to get is some type of email or some type of alert on the virtual machine or hypervisor saying, hey, you've been encrypted, and if you pay us X, Y, and Z amounts, we're going to unencrypt your data. Now, do they actually do that? Maybe, maybe not. That's always up in debate. Now, they also like to usually use some type of e-currency. Now, you really don't see like Bitcoin or Ethereum anymore. You really see like more of the hodgepodge coins that aren't as, well known. So what do we do if we did get hit with ransomware? How do we know we have a good copy? So on the right-hand side is our Veeam box. Now, in that Veeam box, what we're going to do is spin up a virtual lab, or what I like to call an on-demand sandbox. Basically, what this is it's a complete segregated network, and what it can do is we can put a backup in it, and we can test it with a heartbeat test, a ping test, and an application test to really make sure that once we actually go back to push that backup into the production side, we know it has been validated. Now, at the very bottom here, you're going to see leveraging modern snapshot solutions, and that's actually going to be my next slide here, is how do we actually recover from those particular snapshots. So as you see here, the unprotected side is basically, hey, I'm taking a month or a daily backup every day at 8 p.m. And that's really great. You're still taking a backup, which is good. Now, but what happens if you need to restore back to 11 a.m. or you need to restore back to 3 p.m. in the afternoon? Well, you're going to have to wait until that backup has been situated at 8 o'clock when it's able to gather all of that data. Now, if we pair that with snapshots or storage snapshots, we can just go back and restore to the point in time state very granularly that we want to pick. Now, how do we do this? We do this actually through Veeam Explorers. Now, these Veeam Explorers can do full-blown restores or just very granular restores. Really kind of depends what we're really trying to do. Now, some of the Explorers that we have are Exchange, SharePoint, SQL, Oracle, and Active Directory, just to name a few. We have tons and tons of these particular Explorers, and that's why we call it our Explorer series. We have so many of them. So what I also want to talk about today is actually what it looks like to do a restore on our next slide here. And we're going to be actually looking at the time it takes to do a restore, right? So the slide looks a little busy, but it's going to be the same one that we've been building off of. So there's a bunch of different options that we can do to actually make sure that we can push this data back into production. Now, we can do it from storage snapshots, what I just talked about. We can also do it from a sure backup target. So really making sure that it's secure and we can take it back from there. We can also do it from an offline tape storage array, or again, one of my favorites is Cloud Connect, aka phoenixNAP, pushing that data back to your on-premise Veeam Backup and Replication server. So you can go out and mount that virtual machine or physical server and be back up and running in a matter of hours, minutes, really kind of depends on the amount of data. So really good stuff here. That's really how we're going to be able to do that. And again, the biggest purpose here is showing how we can restore that data. Now, how do we know we're actually protected though? So we know how to restore the data. We know where we're coming from. So we're coming from either Cloud Connect, these storage snapshots, these sure backup jobs, or even an offline tape repository. But here on our next slide here, what we're going to be talking about is how do we know for a fact that we're protected? Now, this is actually going to be a Veeam 1. William, if you could just the next slide for me, please. We're going to be talking about how do we know for 100% fact, hey, more of a monetary value, or not a monetary value, more of an analytical and monitoring side. How do we know that we are protected? And this is exactly it. This is where I like to introduce Veeam 1. Veeam 1 is your full encompassing solution to really make sure that your VMs are protected. It's going to show you what VMs are protected, what data stores are being protected, how long it took them to be protected, and more importantly than that, it's going to give you the protected side, but it's also going to show you, hey, maybe you just went through a new hardware refresh, and you need to make sure that all the new VMs and all the new physical servers are actually being protected. And this is what it's going to do. It's going to generate a report for you. Now, it's going to do a lot more than that. It's going to do like backup assessments. It's going to do ransomware alerts. So let's just pretend, hey, you know, you've been having a change rate data, let's call it 5 gigs a night. That's pretty high. But let's just say, hey, all of a sudden it went from 5 gigs a night to 200 terabytes. They're rewriting over this data. They're really trying to encrypt this data. And it's going to say, hey, there's something really bad going on and very malicious going on in this particular report. And you're going to get it via SMTP. Same thing with like backup reports and sure backup reports to really test and verify that particular type of data. So again, very good way to understand and know with 100% certainty, hey, these are the guys that are protected. These are the guys not. There's a lot of cool stuff that Veeam can do. There's like our Veeam 1 can do. There's like 250, maybe even a little more now of reports that we can use to our advantage to really make sure that we can provide that peace of mind and really be able to have the admin sleep better at night. Now, kind of talking about sleeping better at night, right? This is where I like to talk about the Hardened Linux repository. Now, this Hardened Linux repository is natively immutable. So maybe some of you guys have heard of it. Maybe the first time you ever heard of it was when William mentioned it here in the beginning of the webinar. But immutable targets or immutable backup targets are really going to be very critical to the upcoming really preventing yourself from ransomware, malicious insiders, any type of malicious encryption or deletion. This is where that really comes into shine, and where this is really going to live, and this is going to live either on-prem or potentially up in the cloud. Really kind of depends how we're going to chop it up. But in this particular case, this Hardened Linux repository is going to be on-prem, and we're going to be able to use it as an on-prem storage target to keep your backups immutable. And what does it really do? It makes sure that, hey, malicious insiders, actors, and any type of rogue agent or type of ransomware encryption just cannot delete the data, because it's write once, read many. It's just like worm. Now, here on our next slide is actually going to be a little more in depth to actually what the Hardened Linux repository looks like. Now, if you can see here on the top right-hand side, I want to grab your attention where it's actually talking about the backup job. So let's just pretend you have a malicious user or some type of cryptoware. Basically what they did is they logged into the server, they have the access, and they're going to try to prepare the entries, aka the backup jobs or data for deletion. And it's actually, you can see it's building the deletion task, it's doing the processing, but it said, hey, the backup deleted, but with warning. But actually, did it delete the data? If you actually look a little further in that log, it says failed to delete the data because where is it at? It's at an immutable storage, and it cannot be deleted until that immutable flag has been gone. And usually a mutable flag is set for like 30 days. So by the time something is actually found out on the network, you're still secure, all your backups are there. And even if the admin or rogue agent or malicious insider was trying to delete this data, they literally could not delete the data whatsoever. It's just physically impossible. Now, this is really, really good because we're denying the actual act of the deletion of backups. And how we're doing it is actually setting an immutable flag inside of Linux, so that way, hey, no matter what, it's not touchable and you're good to go. Now, one next thing here I want to touch on, the last thing I really want to touch on is in the Hardened Linux repository side is, hey, what happens? Where is all this done at? And what we're using is XFS on Linux, so we're going to use that to leverage change block tracking or cloning. And we use a non-root account, so we use single-use credentials. And really, this is really critical, is we make sure that this cannot be manipulated. It's just impossible. It's one-time use credentials. They're not going to be able to get in. And I want to direct your attention to the bottom of the screen here. This is actually where we set an immutable flag. If you see here, it says, hey, mark recent backups immutable for X amount of days. In this particular case, it's going to be 30 days. And what is this doing? It's going to protect your backups from any modification. So they can't rewrite over your data. They can't delete your data. So ransomware or hackers just can't do that. And the biggest thing is it's going to keep GFS, full backups that are made immutable during this duration of the retention policy. So some of you guys may know, some of you guys may not, but GFS, grandfather, father, son, are your actual active pools for monthly, weekly, yearly backups. So you can go back and restore a month ago. You can go back and restore a week ago. You're going to have those particular backups that can't be overwritten or deleted. Now, some of the other cool things I want to talk about that was added in is going to be called archive tier. Now, the archive tier is a new piece to this. However, performance and capacity are not new. All right, so where is this found inside of Veeam? That's a very good question. So this is all found in what's called SOBR, a scale-out backup repository job. So I just want to kind of walk you through what it looks like when we're moving data from one section to another. Performance tier is going to be your local on-prem spinning disk. It could be, a NAS, it could be a file share, it could be iSCSI, it could be Fiber Channel 1. Wherever that may be, that's just the actual performance or the spinning disk that's actually presented to Veeam that we can land on first. Now, capacity tier is object storage. So think of this as Amazon S3 or Azure Blob. Now, the new cool thing is going to be archive tier. So actually pushing that data from Amazon S3 or from Azure Blob into more cold storage. And we can actually do this with actually moving grandfather, father, son, or active folds into those particular sides, right? So for Amazon, you're going to be going to Glacier Deep, right? So everybody loves to talk about Glacier Deep. That's awesome. Same thing for the Azure Blob. You're going to go from Blob to Blob Storage Archive tier. Now, here's something I want you guys to note, and I always get it in all my webinars, is, hey, can I go from Amazon S3 to Blob Archive tier? No, Can I go from Microsoft Azure hot or cold storage to Amazon Glacier? As of right now, no. So it has to be Amazon to Amazon or blob to blob or Microsoft to Microsoft. So just to keep that in mind, that is one of the stipulations as of right now, the way that it can move. All right, so that's the cool stuff around archives here. Again, think of long-term archival data. Now, the next cool thing I really like to talk about, I could ramble about this for hours, but I'll kind of keep it just to a couple slides here, is continuous or continuous data protection, or what I like to call a CDP. What is CDP at the end of the day? What this really comes down to is near zero recovery point objectives. What is it really doing? We're minimizing the data loss. Regardless of, what we're looking at, RPOs are very critical. I always hear a lot, especially with, the first call with a client, hey, what does your RPO want to be like? Well, I want it 0. And then we're like, okay, and, RPOs have a cost associated with them. Maybe you have $500,000 worth of data, but it's going to cost you $1.5 million to do some type of continuous data protection to really get that low number, because there's a lot of hardware involved, right? So making sure that we understand exactly how that goes is very critical here. So again, we're really making sure that we can understand exactly what your RPO wants to be and how we can get there. And with continuous CDP, or continuous data protection, that's where this comes in along. Basically think, hey, we're going to be kicking off a backup job, hey, every minute, or maybe just continuously. That's where CDP really comes into play. And then actually on the next one, and again, I'm going to keep it kind of short and sweet because CDP can get kind of complex here. So I'm going to kind of talk about what it looks like from a high level overview of CDP. So this is a CDP breakdown of the data flow. So in the very middle, you're going to see basically he is the coordinator, right? So he's the top level manager. He's the one telling everybody what to do. And this is all on vCenter. It assigns replication as tasks. Now we have some of our source filters. So you see the little filters on the side. These guys run ESXi and intercept IO requests. Now one filter instance is used per vdisk. So just kind of keep that in mind there. Now we have the source daemon, right? This is crazy. So this guy, he's the traffic cop. He's letting people in. He's letting people out. He's relying on proxy traffic to basically be the backup coordinator. He's kind of doing he's like the quarterback of the coordinator, right? So he's telling everybody where to go, pushing the data, and just throwing it where it needs to go. Now we have our source proxies. Our source proxies are very, very, very crazy because they're workhorses, and they are the ones that change filters, stores, RAM, disk, and they really create the replication state and compression in encryption. Again, there's a ton of cool stuff around CDP. I could ramble for hours. The last two things I want to talk about is the traffic proxy. So the traffic proxy basically receives and or blocks source proxies and then decompresses and de-encrypts that data. Because you got to think, there's encryption. We use AES 256 bits to do a lot of this encryption here. And then we have our target daemon filter. Basically what this does is it writes to the data source, filters inactive and undo failovers. Tons of good stuff here. Again, I could ramble on about CDP forever. But the next thing I want to talk about is our extended instant recovery. So our expanded instant recovery, what is this? And what is it? What is it doing? So instant recovery in the nutshell is making sure that we can get back up against the wall as fast as humanly possible. And what is this doing is really making sure that we're mastering RTO. Now we can do this for SQL, we can do this for Oracle, and we can do this for NAS. That's where we can do the expanded instant recovery for those particular items. Now, I'm not going to bore you guys with too much, but the next one is actually going to be a little bit more in depth on the expanded side of the actual recovery. So what are we doing? We're going to be challenging with RPO or RTO goals, right? So maybe you guys have some crazy RTO goals. We can also do, hey, I really need to make sure that my SQL, I really need to make sure my Oracle databases have the least amount of downtime as possible. And that's where the instant recovery really comes into play. Same thing with NAS, right? When your NAS is down and that's your file server for all of your internal systems, that really affects all of your users. Maybe they could, they're not able to do their due diligence and actually do their daily job if the NAS is down. And that's how we can make sure that with instant recovery, For instance, for SQL or Oracle, we can get those databases back into the production environment regardless of size. And again, uninterrupted user access to that NAS, because we're going to use instant VM recovery or instant recovery of that NAS box to basically publish an entire file share directly from the backup. Really making sure that if your back's up against the wall, you need to get your access to NAS and you have users that need it. Boom, that's how we do so. And then really at the end of the day, disaster recovery or DR flexibility with any Veeam backup to Microsoft Hyper-V. This is huge. So you can go from VMware to Hyper-V, Hyper-V to VMware. All right, cool. So I'm actually going to talk a little bit next about the service provider console. So the Veeam service provider console is awesome. This is one of the things I talk about all the time, day in and day out. So the service provider console is free for all the service providers, right? Which is awesome. That's just a needed tool for them. Now, what is this service provider console doing? This service provider console is doing a lot of different things. It's actually monitoring virtual machines, workstations, such as your laptop. It's also monitoring any physical servers and NAS boxes. It's making sure, hey, are we meeting our SLAs? Are we actually getting the backups, and what type of backups are getting there? There's a whole bunch of slew of things that the backup Veeam service provider console can do. And this is all managed with Cloud Connect. So the Cloud Connect server and the Veeam service provider console, they're best friends. They share the same SQL table. There's a lot of good stuff that comes with that. Now, what I want to look at next is actually the Veeam service provider console, but more at a high scale, what it looks like when we have a whole bunch of different sites. So as you see here on the right-hand side, we have client site 1, 2, and 3. They have different workloads. Some have 2 hypervisor, maybe VMware and Hyper-V. The other one is just a regular hypervisor with some actual server agents. And then you also have, hey, I have a workstation and 2 servers. And here's your MSP. So here's phoenixNAP right here in the middle, and he's going to be able to do all of this due diligence, and we're going to be able to point that data regardless if it's a VM, regardless if it's a workstation, or just a physical server. And we're going to be able to target Cloud Connect. Cloud Connect is their data center, making sure that we can land on the cloud repositories that sit below. And again, that Veeam service provider console is the guy that's really doing all the monitoring and analytics of the particular Cloud Connect server, making sure that we are able to back up on time and meeting those particular thresholds. So at this time, I'm going to pass it back to my good buddy William, one of our Platinum VCSP partners here with Veeam. And yeah, take it away, William. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. So Mike gave you this super awesome rundown of all the technologies that Veeam has built. And one of the best things about partnering with Veeam for us and for our customers is that we're able to add our experience with these platforms, kind of combine them with infrastructure as a service options and make it easy for you to consume and protect your data across the entire globe, right? So getting that point-click DR, super simple, easy to go, right? Offsite copies of your data, immutable copies of your data, like all the things that he talked about, insider protection. All of these capabilities are clicks away. If you're a Veeam customer already, they're clicks away for you to consume and help protect your business. So when we put everything together, you get, pay as you go or pay for what you use specifically, right? Our 24/7 live support, right? People are there to talk to you, not email you, not get to you in 5 or 6 hours with an email saying, how can I help you, right? You can call us, you can speak to someone 24/7 all the way around the globe, right? When you need us, when you need your data back, we're gonna give you fast and resilient recovery options, right? And then we're going to be able to replicate that data around the globe. So if you decide, hey, I want to be able to back up, use archive tier to back up to our object storage platform, or use Cloud Connect to back up to one of our regions, right? You have so many options for data protection, multi-region data protection at your disposal. So it's really, really great. And so when we look at like the bevy of solutions that we have where we integrate and use Veeam to make our service delivery better, sometimes it's native Veeam services, right? The Cloud Connect portfolio has so many things in it. Point-click DR, offsite backup, archive tier, all these things you can do through Veeam talking to a service provider. Our managed backup for Office 365 product, that literally it's having a conversation with our teams and solution architects, figuring out what you want to back up, getting us a credential, and then we're taking care of that for you. Pay per mailbox, right? Easy. The disaster recovery components with Veeam, right? This ability to replicate live your environment from one on-prem data center, one region, etc., to another region. And then in our data security cloud product, where we brought all of this together, we basically built a home for you to pick up, lift, and shift your VMware environment to a hosted platform and enhance your data protection and security through that migration, right? So it's migrating to the cloud without transformation, but enhancing your data protection and security as you go. That's the key that we're able to provide with the Data Security Cloud product. And so we continue to expand our portfolio, right? Building out this global network, building out regions everywhere across the globe that we can deliver services, making sure that our customers can get access to pNAP services when they need it. That's at the heart of what we're doing every day, right? And ultimately providing expertise, help, assistance, support, and an infrastructure platform that's flexible, that lets you do the things that you want to do and not have to make sacrifices to a platform where you have to do it their way and only their way because this is how they've decided that things are going to work. So I'm going to launch a quick poll question right here. It's the only one of the day. Didn't subject you to any other ones. And make sure that our marketing team gets their answers to these questions. If there's anything we can do, even if you don't want to have a sales conversation, you just want to talk about the strategy of what can be done to execute on backup DR, let's sit down and do that, right? Let's sit down and have that conversation and see what fits. If it doesn't fit, if it's not a good fit, fine, no big deal. There's, hopefully you're still using Veeam. Hopefully you're still using pNAP if you're here on this call, right? There's lots of things in it for everyone. So I appreciate everyone clicking the button here. I know our marketing team appreciates everyone clicking the button. And I will go ahead and shut down that poll right now. All right. And with that, I am going to get into questions. All right. And let's see what we got here. All right. So let's see. Are all the backups that are stored? Okay. So Mike, if you're using the Linux hardened repositories, right? Is it something that you just have to you make a hard repository, you put every backup you want that's hardened there, and then bam, it's taken care of? Or is it something you have to select and be choosy about which ones you want to have immutable?
Yes, so this is a two-phase answer. So yes, as long as they have an immutable flag set, it's going to be immutable. But even going into that repository, it is going to be a hardened repository that's not just easily able to be deleted, but that immutable flag is really the key there.
Got it. Perfect. What about archive tier? Are there options to do immutability there?
So yes, so Amazon, absolutely, for going into Glacier Deep. Now Microsoft, not so much. They haven't actually released the API yet for at least immutable inside of their cold storage.
Also with phoenixNAP object storage, you can do that as well. So our S3 compatible object storage platform supports immutability as well, powered by our friends at Cloudian. So you can get a one-stop shop there for all of that. Let's see here. Let's see. I'm gonna choose another good one here. Backups. All right. So what about, let's talk about encryption, right? Do you recommend encrypting your backups that you're making on-prem or in the cloud?
Absolutely. Encryption is absolutely key. We use AES 256-bit to handle the encryption algorithm.
Gotcha. And then is that done automatically, or is it configured at like the job level? How does that work?
Yeah, so actually it's a yes and no. So when we're going off to object storage, that's a manual encryption, but end to end, when it's at rest and it's at rest in object storage, they're both encrypted. The time that we're only setting the encryption really is when we're going off over the WAN to those particular vendors of choice.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Let's see here. Are you, and you guys are handling that, the encryption, right? Like if I am restoring a backup, are you just unencrypting it on the fly as you're doing the restoration?
Yeah, so it's actually doing it automatically, which is very nice.
Sweet. So yeah, I don't have to take any other actions after I make my restoration to make that a reality.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's see here. We got any more? Let's see here. Just trying to make sure we get all of the good ones. Yeah, that's it. I think that's it today, guys. Thanks, Mike, for everything. Once again, I hope everyone learned something today. Remember, the handouts are down on the bottom. I'll leave it open for just another minute or two so that people can grab those handouts. I know we're also going to send a follow-up email. If you click yes to contact me, believe me, we're not going to like pound your door down tomorrow, right? Somebody will reach out. They'll get you a call scheduled to talk about kind of what your thoughts are, what you're thinking about. And then, yeah, hopefully everyone has a great weekend. Some contact information for you. And we'll do it again soon. Mike, thanks for everything.